Well, welcome to this short wrap-up of the HPA Retreat. We're here in Indian Wells and enjoying some nice weather, but I can assure you for the past 3 or 4 days we've been inside following the main presentations. So what is the HPA Retreat? It's an occasion where the technologists and some of the practitioners in our industry get together, share some of the issues, talk about the solutions, and it's been a fascinating 4 or 5 days. We've had something like, well, more than 600 delegates at this event, so a very major event indeed. And one of the key aspects of it is that you're not allowed to talk about commercial issues. So we're getting down to the real issues. There are 3 main components. One is, of course, the conference itself, but alongside is a tech exhibit called the Innovation Zone. And there's a criteria about demonstrating there that the displays should all relate to the presentations given in the main conference. And last but not least, for those of us that can get up really early in the morning, there are the breakfast sessions. And there we have themed tables where you can keep the discussion going, from 7:30 in the morning, Stan?
That's right, bright and early. And we actually had a table discussing about should we stop using the term new media, which was a good one. But the first day of the event really is focused more on the Hollywood and the post side, and the theme of the event is Snowflake Workflows. And what we mean by Snowflake Workflows is they're all different, and snowflakes are essentially turning into blizzards that are turning into avalanches, because they're all different. They're all too complex and with very little metadata happening. So that's really caused confusion. The other thing that came up is, of course, the number of versions we have for delivery. You know, there can easily be 400 to 500 different versions on the delivery side, which is very complex. Now, on the consumer side, with the different types of sets we have coming out, even consumers are confused, particularly with not only 4K, but HDR, and what about high frame rates and brightness levels and things like that. So really, we've moved from a discussion on bits, i.e. resolution and depth, things like that, over into nits.
Well, yeah, and let me pick up on the displays, because the fact that we've got different display technologies being discussed here at the conference is one of the added complications, because we've clearly got the OLED displays and then we've got the liquid crystal displays, which have very different characteristics. And so once again, the industry is fighting with working with all these disparate technologies and at the end of the day making it look good on the consumer display.
But I must say, one thing that has come out of all these discussions, particularly with HDR and wider color gamut, is the industry's now decided to revisit the math of the original decisions. And some of the most interesting things out of this were viewing rooms are changing, new matrices for color over to components, to YCRCB, and over to YUV, things like that. And having those different numbers actually come down into revisiting not only the math, but what we're seeing on the screen now.
Yeah, and I felt that it's very interesting actually to see the different types of discussions around that, because clearly traditional broadcasters seeing at this event have much more of a challenge because of the huge legacy they've got in technology. And so for things like UHD and HDR, we're seeing organizations, they've been speaking here, like Netflix and Amazon, who are pioneering some of those new technologies. So I think the problem for broadcasters is that if you want to go to some of these new formats, you wouldn't start from where they're coming from. Their legacy is actually causing them serious problems in terms of maintaining compatibility.
Right. Now, one of the co-producers of Star Wars was in from, and he was giving us some little secrets that happened, of course, during the filming. But of course, a lot of it was shot on film. But the other thing is it's released, as everyone knows, but now they're just looking at doing the HDR version. So it shows things like that weren't even thought about right at the beginning.
Yeah. And something else that in a sense caught my eye from the presentations was a fresh look at frame rates. We've clearly seen a move to moving up to higher frame rates, which is understandable, but some of the presentations here were showing how you can make more intelligent choices and uses of frame rates in the production process, and I found that fascinating.
Well, I guess some of the things, again, last year the big discussion was, no, I'll never go to high frame rates, I won't try that. But I think the demonstration they were showing is you can actually shoot in higher frame rates and then emulate any frame rate you want.
But all of this, again, from the conference, you get the impression raises the challenge, I think you mentioned it already, of broadcasters and content creators have to make more versions than ever. I think one person said we're talking about more than 400 versions of a program for worldwide distribution, and that's a huge challenge. And so a lot of the discussion here has been about those workflows. How can we make them more efficient? What standards can we use to create one master rather than 400 different versions simultaneously? So that has been a key topic, I think, at this conference.
Yeah, now my hats go off to Mark Shubin there, who puts together the technical side of the conference, because he manages to cover all different aspects of elements, right down to the broadcasters panel. And the broadcasters panel, of course, brought up IP.
Yep.
And Bob Seidel was in from CBS discussing IP and his real huge concerns about security and how SDI's never been hacked, but IP, of course, can be. Now, there was another panel where the chap who put together the Fox truck for sports that's totally IP was on, and everything's up and running fine. So you end up from one side to the other. But I didn't feel a sense of, are we going IP or not, or SDI dying or not dying, or any of those things. It's just inevitable, it's happening, it's a slow transition, and it's a hybrid transition.
But I think in a way that is a breakthrough moment, because if you look back a few years at an event like this, there would be even more people highlighting what are the challenges, what are the problems, and why you shouldn't go to IT technology. So I think this event clearly recognized the inevitability of us moving in that direction, and it was much more about how do we manage it rather than how do we resist it.
Right. Now, thinking outside the box, there was a chap in from NASA talking about the next set of space trips out to Mars, and actually pleading with everyone on the floor to help develop imaging techniques to go to Mars, and some of the image sensors, and giving us all the technology behind how the pixels die in space.
Yeah, yep. And back on the theme of the IP, I think there was also some good discussions about what are the sweet spots in terms of using IP. And with that in mind, although this is primarily content creation, post-production environment, there was a significant discussion around remote production and using IP for that, which I found particularly interesting.
As well as cloud.
Well, that becomes part of it. Yes, yeah. Cloud was there. So some quite progressive discussions about how those workflows are really going to change.
Right, and this is a great networking event. As you said, it's not really on the commercial side much, but there are probably 30 to 40 tabletop displays, and Canon had a great display of a darkened tent with a little toy lion in it that they shot on their new sensor that actually is 4 million ISO. And when you look at that, you really need these things when you get down to the dark ranges.
Yeah, sure. So Stan, for me, clearly a lot of the time this event was taken up with UHD, it was taken up with IP and IT. What are the sort of lasting impressions for you?
Well, one of the things I love about this event is it does marry the film side over to the video side, and ultimately they are getting closer, and they have been getting closer for years, but the workflows are the most important thing, and that was pretty clear. The change in color spaces, how we handle these things, how we can come up with common versions, and how we can have not so much issues as far as the Snowflake workflows.
Indeed. So Stan, I think we ought to put our sunglasses back on and go inside and look at some of those bright screens.
That sounds great.